自分の力を使ってあの子たちのように竜の安住の場所を作る。それが私の願い。竜使いは人間のよってあなたの先だじゃ。家族みんなのために竜の覚醒。次はいつまた私のところに来てくれるの？
Hey everyone, this is Nitro. In this video, I'm going to be doing a shorter video on covering Renata because this was the video I meant to do for a while and I just really have not had the time due to work. So this is going to be a lower quality than usual, but I'll basically just talk about her talent and her bonds and then what equipment she should be using while showing it in game. So let's start with her talent, which is Vengeful Dragon Seal. If any friendly unit is attacked by an enemy within 1 range span, you gain 1 mobility. This buff lasts 1 turn. The 1 mobility buff becomes 2 mobility at 6 stars. And it also has this second effect. The attacker is inflicted with Dragon Seal, where when attacked by Renata, you cannot be guarded, damage taken is increased by a certain percentage, and you cannot trigger act again effects. This debuff lasts 2 turns. So the damage taken increase goes from 20% at 3 stars to 25% at 4 stars to 30% at 5 stars to a 40% damage increase at 6 stars. So due to the combination of her getting 2 extra mobility rather than 1 and this damage increase going up to plus 40% damage, it is recommended that Renata is used at 6 stars because extra mobility always really helps, and 40% damage is a big difference. So she is one of those characters that if you plan to use her, you have to raise her up to 6 stars, so that can be difficult. The other thing that should be mentioned is, according to Langrisser, her talent should also apply passives or disabled onto the enemies. So in this example, I have set up Renata within 1 tile of these characters. So what I'm expecting is Cherie to charge forward, kill this cavalry general, then move forward even further to attack. And let's see what happens here. So here we go. So Cherie does as expected, takes out the cavalry general, act again, and strikes Renata, which actually hits Threaded. So Vengeful Dragon Seal is now applied onto Cherie, and if we click on Cherie, we can see that she cannot benefit from move again effects, cannot use a passive skill, and has the Dragon Seal effect of being unable to be guarded and taking extra damage. So there is that extra buff, or debuff, sorry, from Renata, which is that enemies are afflicted with cannot use passive skills, in addition to cannot benefit from move again effects. So clearly there are various errors with Renata's Vengeful Dragon Seal description. First of all, there are 3 debuffs applied by Renata, not just 2. And second of all of these debuffs only last 1 turn, not 2. So there are pros and cons to these debuffs. 3 of them are quite annoying to remove, but on the flip side, since they last 1 turn, if you simply end the turn of the character that got the 3 Vengeful Dragon Seal debuffs, they disappear, just like that. So it's an important thing to note, it's fairly easy to remove the Vengeful Dragon Seal debuffs. So in other words, Renata can only do full damage if she is counterattacking against an enemy character. If the enemies have not been attacked, she won't do all that much. However, there is another side to this. Renata can manually apply this debuff on enemies because she has the following skill, Empowering Dragon Seal. So Empowering Dragon Seal deals 0.2 times damage to a single enemy unit on the battlefield and applies Dragon Seal on them. So when attacked by Renata, you cannot be guarded, damage taken is increased by 40%, cannot take effect at the same time as the normal Dragon Seal, and this one lasts for 2 turns. You cannot trigger act against effects, passive skills are silenced, mobility on the enemy is reduced by 2, and you cannot guard as well. So this debuff lasts for 1 turn. So she can manually apply this debuff as well. So, with all that mentioned then, Renata essentially is mainly primarily used as a counterattacker, right? You hope for the enemy to attack your characters, and then Renata then will counterattack and be able to ignore guard on the enemy. So let's move on to talk about her bonds effects and then her gear. Okay. So first, about bonds. Let's bring up her bonding page, and to unlock the bonds, right, the 4th bond comes from Langrisser, and the 5th bond comes from Akka. Okay. Her 3rd bond requires you to complete time ref 3-6. I think her 2nd bond requires you to complete time ref 3-6. Her 3rd bond, I think it's complete elite mode of 3-1. So it's pretty straightforward for bond unlocking. And in terms of her heart bond, it's not listed here, but for her heart bond, it has the following effects. Okay, the level 4 heart bond effect is that for Dragon Caller, when unit hit points is less than 80%, your chance of being crit hit is reduced by 10%. For level 7, when you're attacked by enemies with higher hit points than yourself, your damage dealt is increased by 10% after entering battle. The Lancer effects, if they matter, for level 4 of the Lancer class, Battle God, when ranged attack, physical damage taken is reduced by 10%, and at level 7, when battling with enemies with debuffs, damage dealt is increased by 10%. So mostly I would say the 4th bond is pretty much useless in my opinion, right? The level 7 one though does have some use because it increases your damage dealt on enemies. Okay, so with those things mentioned, let's talk about the skills you would want to bring on her in general. Well, first of all, her 3C is the following. Thunderous Flash. Attacks a single enemy dealing 1.6 times damage. If target unit movement type is flying, attacks the enemy first before battle. And if the target has Dragon Seal effect, it grants you the unflinching before battle begins, where you get 20% hit points upon taking damage that would otherwise be fatal. This can only trigger for 1 time per battle, and it lasts 2 turns. So, a decent 3C, I wouldn't say amazing or godlike. Keep in mind though that, first, she will very frequently be attacking flying characters, and the fact that this does additional damage to flyers may allow her to very easily kill enemies, especially characters like Ares. Okay. Second of all, since when she uses the skill, she cannot die. So that's always useful, right? If you actually die, you just revive. If you don't die, you have this buff for 2 turns. And finally, so that would be one of her recommended skills in general. The second recommended skill in general is Rage Scale, a 1-point passive, where when entering battle, 20% of physical damage taken is reflected back on the enemy. And when reflecting damage, heals for a percentage of this unit's max hit points, equals to 1 times the damage reflected after battle. Always useful to heal up, right? So this effect can help keep her healthy. And then your last 2-point skill is kind of up to you there. You may choose to bring Empowering Dragon Seal to apply that Dragon Seal debuff on enemies. You may choose to bring this Flaying Wing, where you can attack an enemy for 1.5 times damage with additional damage to flyers and reduce damage taken. And other than that, she does have this Savage Attack, where you can stun enemies if you're fighting from defensive terrain before battle begins. So using this means you won't take any damage whatsoever, but very terrain limited. So kind of your choice of those skills, There is also of course, her starting lightning skill for 1.5 times damage, but I generally don't think you would use it for PvP. Maybe for PvE content though. Okay, so these are her attack skills that you would choose to bring. Generally the 3C, the 1-point skill that I mentioned, and then one of her 2-point attack skills. So she'll have 2 attack skills and the Rage Scale. Okay, so with the skills mentioned, let's talk briefly about her soldiers. She has access to the following flyer soldiers: Gargoyles, Vampire Bats. So just by simple process of elimination, her best soldier is Gargoyles, of course, right? She also has access to, let's say, a few other soldiers like this Scorpio from Cavalry, Lava Titans, as well as Stone Colossus, Guardian Cavalry, and finally Orc Berserkers. Okay. In general, you would just be using Gargoyles. It's just that simple. Okay? Because as her flyer class, she has 4 mobility. It says right here, 4 mobility. So you're going to want a soldier that has at least 4 mobility, which means Gargoyles or Vampire Bats, and Gargoyles actually give an attack increase, unlike Vampire Bats, which just restore health. So Gargoyles are her best soldier. And then equipment. So in terms of equipment, the first 3 items are mostly standardized. It's the accessory that is kind of up to you. Okay, Ragnarok is recommended for Renata simply because doing fixed damage before combat can break last rites, right? Given that Renata very frequently attacks flyers, you're going to want to break last rites to make sure she can kill them. She herself does want last rites because that increases her survivability, especially against, let's say, magic attacks and so on. Her helmet is kind of up to you. I personally favor King's Crown, but there are other helmets you can use, of course. Potentially you might consider Flower Boon Bonnet, for example, but I would say in general you would probably want King's Crown because that gives her the ability to increase allied damage, right? But once again, Flower Boon Bonnet is viable. Jormungandr's Eye is a possible piece of equipment. Najord's Feathered Crown may even be considered, but I don't personally won't recommend it because she doesn't do fixed damage to enemies before combat in general, right? But it is possible because if you're attacking, you can get this extra stats, but you really won't get it when you're defending. So multiple viable helmets, but I would say King's Crown is generally considered the best. And the accessory, this is where it gets interesting, the accessory, because her accessory can very much be chosen depending on what you want to do with her. Slayer's Emblem would make her even more deadly against flyers. Overlord's Badge would provide a general stat increase and immunity to defense, magic defense, attack, and int reduction debuffs, as well as mobility reduction debuffs. So it gives a nice amount of hit points and attack, all stats plus 5%, increasing her survivability in general, and the immunities always help. Other than that, other accessories include, let's say, winged shin guards for the maximum attack increase, and some defense increase. So you're stronger against physical attacks, but weaker against magic attacks with this. And then finally, worth considering or worth mentioning, although not generally recommended for her, is the Swordsmith medal. So the Swordsmith medal would be a choice where you would want this because you want that immunity to silence, and maybe the immunity to fixed damage as well. Okay. The massive drawback of using a Swordsmith medal is that you're going to be losing 75 base attack because the other accessories give attack and this one doesn't. So that can very much be a major issue for Renata because that lack of attack may mean that she just doesn't have enough base attack to kill things in general. Right? Even though she has plus 40% damage, if her base attack is low and the enemy base defense is high, she's not going to do much damage at the end of the day. So, but it is worth mentioning, Swordsmith Medal is a viable option, especially if you plan to use Renata as a counter against magic attacks in particular, right? So against magic users, you won't need high attack value to kill them. But against physical attackers, that lack of attack may very much prevent you from doing much damage at all. Alright, so that covers her gear choices, her recommended soldiers, skill choices, and everything about her. So at this point, I'm going to move on to talk about example videos of her in use. So, full disclosure, I have not been able to find a video where Renata was truly deadly. Okay, it just didn't happen very often in Apex Arena. But this is one example of Renata in use where she played a role in the battle for sure. I wouldn't say she was amazing here, but she was in the battle. So this first battle actually has a Swordsmith medal Renata, so her attack is quite low by comparison. And she is a character for player 2. So right now, player 1 is just maneuvering forward a bit slowly. And now, Virkia charges forward, attacks the enemy Bozal, which is guarded by Juggler, She gets to act again, and then she attacks Juggler with Maneuver to swap their positions. Note that Fenrir gets affected by the Empowered Dragon Seal effect of Fenrir's talent on that first strike, since it hit Juggler, and then the second attack of Maneuver also gives her the Empowered Dragon Seal. So Renata attacks Fenrir and easily kills her off as a result. So we saw that she has around 1373 attack, which is quite low, and what made me certain that she has the Swordsmith medal on her. Okay. So with that attack, she easily kills off Fenrir, and a follow-up attack from Mystery Knight unfortunately fails to kill off Juggler here. So, Wilder regroups, heals up Juggler, and then Yusuke jumps in and finishes off Juggler just like that. So now it is 4v4. Renata charges forward, launches out the Empowered Dragon Seal. But Deedlit, casts Sea of Miracles, removes that. So that is one of the big problems with Renata. You can easily remove those debuffs she applies. Nonetheless, Bozo now follows up with a black hole and actually manages to silence both Yusuke and Deedlit. Juggler here then teleports himself forward and launches out Sacred Beast him. Renata, due to damage being hit on Bozo, tries to apply Empowered Dragon Seal on Juggler. But we see here that he is immune to it, because he has Gospel from Deedlit. So then Juggler moves forward and now launches out a Beast Shock attack against Bozo, killing him off anyways. So, more damage being dealt, this time by Langrisser using her 3C, and here Knight of Mysteries launches a single target strike onto Renata. Because all her soldiers are dead, and she only moved, I guess, 4 tiles, it doesn't do enough damage to one-shot this Renata. Comes pretty close, but it's not enough damage. So she lives, and right now, Player 1 is just trying to apply whatever damage she can on these enemies. Wilder now finally applies his high stakes. Quite a late high stakes, but with that high stakes, Yusuke jumps in to try to single target strike Langrisser. They're trading range attacks, and actually this damaged Yusuke dies. So let me just go back a little bit to quickly show that once again. Right? This Langrisser, so Langrisser is at full hit points with Sorceress is, and Yusuke dies to it because Yusuke's damaged. Player 2 chooses to teleport, tactical retreat his characters back. And keep in mind they still have, after all, their Wilder's high stakes buff. So they'll heal before combat. So now Langrisser jumps in, single target strike on Juggler. Juggler is now nearly dead. Mr. Knight tries to respawn with Thunder Zone. This Thunder Zone does kill off Wilder now. And interestingly enough, Player 2 just chose to move Renata up. Doesn't attack anyone. So Langrisser kills off Mystery Knight. There's now just 2 characters left. It's 2 on 2. Deedlit's Sea of Miracles doesn't heal anyone, and now Renata attacks Juggler. I would have thought he would do that last turn, so I'm not sure why he waited a turn to do so. Nonetheless, battle's nearly over. Down goes Deedlit, and now player 2 wins the match. So, can you say Renata made a huge difference in this fight? She participated for sure, but I don't feel like she was a deciding factor. I felt like any damage dealer other than Renata probably would have done the same thing. I guess there was one key point where Renata tanked the hit from the Knight of Mysteries. right? But keep in mind, once again, that the Knight of Mysteries at that point was heavily damaged. All her soldiers were dead. So it's not like you had to tank all that much damage with whoever character needed to tank that. So I just didn't feel like Renata was a deciding factor in this match. She won it, like, I mean, she participated and the match was won by the Renata user, but it wasn't like she was outstanding to the point where, wow, she single-handedly won this fight. If anything, it was more like Langrisser with terrain effects and the debuffs that the terrain effects apply on the enemy won this fight. For the second battle, we get to see Renata in action more as a Tankbuster. So here she's not running Swordsmith Metal, and she has a faction buff from Langrisser providing it, and she also has gargoyles as her soldiers. So player 2 starts with an AoE attack to apply some debuffs on the enemy Landius and do some damage to him. He is immune to some debuffs, of course, due to Overlord's badge presumably, but other debuffs are still applied. Langrisser then jumps in, launches out her AoE to do more damage and some more debuffs on these enemies. Wilder responds with high stakes. So a few debuffs are removed, and unfortunately it looks like Landius did get afflicted with cannot receive buffs. So he doesn't get any of those buffs, I think. Blood Dance from Listel knocks Langrisser down to nearly dead. Dietlich jumps in with Elven Aura and is actually guarded by Listel and ends up with the heal from Dietlich actually killing off his own Langrisser, unfortunately. So that was probably a big misplay from player 2. Continuing on though, player 1 now casts Mass Heal, and Renata jumps in and launches her 3C. Okay, keep in mind she used her Empowered Dragon Seal the turn before, right? So Empowered Dragon Seal disabled passives as one of the debuffs, and it was clearly not removed by Wilder's Mass Heal. So as a result, Wilder's attack, Renata's attack kills off Landius right there. Okay, it's worth also mentioning that, of course, because Landius got afflicted with cannot receive buffs the previous turn, he didn't get to heal before combat at all. But nonetheless, between, let's say, the 40% damage increase, between the attack of Renata, which if I just scroll back a little to the attack, let's just see it. So this is a bit too far back. So let's take a look again. Okay. So here, Renata does the strike, fixed damage before combat with Ragnarok, and with the fixed damage before combat, these Royal Cavalry are below their 80% hit point threshold. So it is worth mentioning, if this Landius was at, let's say, full hit points from Wilder's high stakes, it would be different, right? In that sense, if he was actually at full health, Renata probably didn't have enough damage to one-shot this Landius. I don't think you can assume the Gargoyles do enough damage to kill the Royal Cavalry in that situation. But in this situation, where she does have 1589 attack, where she does have the Gargoyles at full hit points, doing 40% increased damage due to the Empowered Dragon Seal, and using the 1.6 times damage 3C, that's enough damage to kill off this damaged Landius. So, Tankbuster Renata. Okay. Obviously, this kind of strategy won't work if you had a Gospel to apply onto Landius, so it does depend very much on your healers and so on, right? If you could make Landius immune to all debuffs, then Renata's won't be a Tankbuster at all. But this kind of situation did allow Renata to function as a Tankbuster. And in this case, we see Yusuke take out the only healer, which was Dietlich. So it is 4v3, and it's just not a good situation for player 2. So knockback, debuff, right? But Zerida in Bloodthirster form, immune to all debuffs. And then she quickly assassinates Rene, being in Bloodthirster form. Landius tries to smash this Zerida, but due to healing before combat, due to high stakes, she lives. And then Listel strikes Renata. So, Zerida, fighting against Renata, kills off Renata due to getting healed to full health. So between Extreme Magic Bow, between getting healed to full health, easily kills off Renata. And then it's just wiping out Landius at this point. So Yusuke charges forward, first attack, takes off Landius' first life, and player 2 retreats at that point, right? Surrendering. So, but nonetheless, we did get to see Renata at least assassinate an enemy tank at the very start, although the overall superior party for player 1 won him the fight. And those were the 2 examples I found of Renata in combat. There are others for sure, but there just aren't that many battles, in my opinion, of Renata being a character that makes a massive difference in PvP. And that's a huge part of why I'm not personally building her. And the other aspect of this is that for PvE content, Renata is not necessary because Landius and Ledin weaken the enemy so much that they're easy to kill. And that's everything I wanted to say in this video. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this useful to you. And on that note, Nitro out.